sit on either side. You can sit wherever you
Wherever the name goes, that's one less decision I have to make today. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Of course, my hands are cold. I forgot to confirm.
That's all right. We figured as much.
All right, Bruce, we're ready to go. Once everybody's settled here.
I did start
Not including soft cost.
right. Well and truly ready to go.
Yep.
All right, welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to see you. We want to express our condolences to the family of Jeremy Miller for their loss. We appreciate what he contributes to this group and wish him all our best wishes for the family. So
Thank you.
we'll convene the meeting.
All right, we have a call to order.
Yes,
All right.
call to order, please.
Justin Hurley Braswell. Here. Bruce Johnson.
Here.
Dave Lintz.
Here.
William Messner.
Present.
Maddie Sauter.
Here.
Cynthia Wagner.
Here.
Kent Yu is absent. We do have a quorum. So, want me to launch?
Yeah, kick us off, get us started.
Okay, so there's a couple of housekeeping things I want to take care of. Next month, so the immediate next steps for all agency people that are on the call, we'll be releasing the planning manual shortly, once it's finally approved this month. And that'll explain what's expected of agencies in terms of their plan development and their presentation requirements and guidelines. And I'll also be releasing a presentation template. I know many agencies really appreciated that, and I sort of streamlined it a little bit, but it will be kind of plug and play for a lot of the information that you'll need to provide. And all this sort of culminates into what is our next meeting, which is our customary kickoff event, where agencies can come to CPAB and interact with the board, hear the board sort of outline their sort of expectations, but we're going to run through what is expected for your agency facility plans and any capital project requests that you have, that as far as their sort of review and evaluation by the board. So there's more to come on this, and oh, I got somebody coming in. More to come on this. In addition, that I'm also putting together, so we had an executive order regarding seismic, which you guys all know, that we went through and we developed that template. And the data collection template is for agencies to provide information that is important for how we sort of prioritize our seismic improvements and identify buildings that we want to make investments in terms of mitigation and whatnot. So I have those templates built, and they're going to be released to the agencies to fill out, but there's going to be some context that I got to put together. So that will be forthcoming as well, and I'll walk through that with agency folks as needed to help complete that. Some agencies are just going to be very easy because they have a low number of buildings. Some agencies are going to have a little more effort because of the nature of their portfolio. So, but we'll get there. Other than that, we're sort of picking up a conversation we had last meeting where we were talking about having some review criteria and what is established for the board to use to evaluate the plans and projects and what their decisions are. And this was something we've used in the past. And I kind of cleaned it up a little bit. And so it's part of this is a little bit of a training, continuing our board training. But also we want to springboard into a conversation about sort of the future of how we summarize projects and I guess an attempt to kind of prioritize or rank projects in a way that the board sort of expresses why this is a worthwhile, meaningful project versus another. Still kind of getting my bearings on what that would be, but this conversation is sort of initiated to at least start that conversation. And Bruce is going to help us out because they have a pretty extensive kind of review and prioritization kind of rubric that they use. And I think there's things that we may be able to borrow from that, where there's other things that may be very specific to state agencies that we'll have to sort of figure out. And we have, I guess also in terms of the schedule, I guess it's worth mentioning that presentations, and this is for agency folks, will be June, July, and August, and you'll be put into your groups. And I know that's a lot of agencies in one presentation setting. We did this last time because the governor's office wanted to use that time to meet with agencies to kind of evaluate their capital requests. And so ferreting out the projects that didn't probably didn't have a likelihood of being approved or part of the governor's budget. So you're just evaluating projects that are considered valuable or feasible or whatever. I don't know what that conversation is like. So that means we kind of lost a month. We lost March. No, May. So everything's gonna be June, July, and August. All that will be listed in the planning manual. You'll get your like your group assignments. It's according to the basic logic of simpler agencies with not a lot of buildings are prioritized to go first because it's easy for them to prepare their facility plans in that time frame, and giving the larger agencies more time to do their work. So that's just a heads up. That's what's coming.
And then Daniel, with that, we're not stacking like a whole bunch of the complex ones in a meeting where they're just gonna get rushed on presentations, right?
The last meeting, the August meeting, will be the largest agencies, but it's the least amount of presentations.
Okay.
So we're
So we're giving them time.
yeah, we're giving them time. And it's also important to note that I extended the meeting times per your suggestion for those 3 meetings. And I know it's a lot of commitment for all of you. I'm very mindful of that. So the only thing I can do is bring donuts and coffee.
Don't tell me.
Donuts, oh, I was gonna help them for donuts today.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You can get me another time.
No, there's some good ones for presentations.
Can I just ask a question about the August meeting? I am going to be in Wyoming on that day, so I'm glad we scheduled it way in advance.
Okay.
I don't know, is there an ability to see if another Friday would work for everybody, or is that locked and loaded because there's so many people there? In which case, I'll try to figure out how to scab it.
It's locked and loaded in the attempt that,
Tetons.
yeah, it's, well, lucky you. You know, trade.
I know.
It's locked and loaded because we have meetings on a specific day of the month. And unless there's exigent circumstances like a holiday or something.
Yeah, got it.
So
That's all good. I'll try and figure out. Can I participate via Teams?
always, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna try and I'll figure out if I can try to do that.
Starlink or
But
something.
I would say it's also recognized that people go on vacation.
Yeah.
Sorry, this has been planned for like a
We
year.
can
Yeah.
survey we can ask Amy to help survey that we'll have quorum among the other members on that day.
Good idea.
Yeah.
All right.
And just as a, I'm being the heavy here, want to enforce please remember to notify Amy that you're gonna be here,
Or not.
Or
If you
not.
Can't make it. let me know.
because that allows us to assess what our quorum situation is in advance. So,
So with that, sorry to be disruptive, I'm having my hip replaced March 10th, so I will not be here next month.
that's fine.
And I think I mentioned that. Okay.
You are excused.
Thank
It's an
you.
excused absence.
I'll be here, but I'll be pretty questionable with my content. So,
That one you can call into though.
yeah, yeah, it'll be lots of fun. Yeah, I'll be very dedicated.
You Start streaming about building plans and.
It's on Percocet, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna share, what I've got to kind of start things off.
After my knee surgery, Marty, I thought I was real smart. Had my laptop and thing, and I'm just high as a kite.
Yeah.
So I sent this is essentially what is our established review criteria for agency facility plans and also projects. And so just important to know your advisory in nature, the DAS director and the proposing agency, that you are tasked with using your professional knowledge and expertise to consider these questions as you're going through and evaluating. If you need to take notes, that's up to you, but we try not to collect notes just so they're not, a bunch of public record stuff that doesn't need to be, chicken scratch or whatever. So, and just to kind of emphasize what your role is in using these guidelines for evaluating plans. The important thing is to provide constructive feedback to the agency. I just want to emphasize that that's sort of the point of what you're providing. So if an agency isn't addressing something, it's not a punitive thing. It's an opportunity to say, well, did you consider this? It's more, think of you using your expertise to coach agencies and do maybe a better project approach or things, sort of resolving issues in their planning that need to be addressed. So there's two levels of review. So there's agencies submit a plan. Plan is what they're going to spend money on or proposing to spend money on that deals with capital renewal, deferred maintenance, and their capital projects. And to do that, there's a couple of guidelines that we sort of try to abide by. And one is the plan support the agency's overall mission, purpose, and strategic goals. So it's incumbent upon the agency to emphasize those in their presentations. And that's part of the guidance that I give the agencies for developing the presentation. So this mirrors what the agencies are required to do or asked to do. So making sure that the plan sort of seems reasonable and in sort of addressing what the agency's strategic goals are. It's not something that's out of left field that doesn't make sense, unless it's a project that has some sort of uniqueness to it that it may be new or a new program or something like that that's not just getting developed. Does a plan adequately convey significant factors influencing the agency's facilities? So, what are the factors that are driving their need for facility? You got to think about planning. Facility planning it really is derived from the agency's operations and mission and their sort of operational programs and whatnot. That creates demand. And how does the agency deal with the demand created by that programmatic need? One way of meeting demand is physical space. So your other factors are, employees, all this kind of stuff. But we're dealing with what is the facility solution to this demand problem, and is that seem like a sound solution for what they're proposing? So there are factors that drive an agency's needs. Some of them may be just they need better space, or they need newer space, or they have something where they're accommodating a whole new programmatic effort. So something to consider. Does a plan adequately address the agency's long-term needs or capacities? So I think that kind of speaks for itself. But it's also incumbent upon the agency to kind of qualify what their long-term needs and capacity is. Part of this is planning for the future, but also having a level of utilization of existing space and whatnot to deal with that demand factor. Does the plan consider reasonable alternatives for meeting the agency's needs? So our expectation is that what you propose in your plan, if it's a series of projects, that you've considered various alternatives to meeting that demand. Where it's building A versus building B versus we're going to scrunch everybody in our existing building and that's how we're going to do it. That needs to be explained. And this is sort of the meat of it, does the plan indicate a trend of effective stewardship? So there's a little 1 on this right here. If you go down and how do we measure effective stewardship? This is your cheat sheet about what you would use to kind of just follow along the term. So we use what's called a facility condition index, FCI, which is kind of this expression of facility maintenance needs relative to its current replacement value. So we want to look at, there's a sort of scale about what a good FCI is. Good, fair, poor, very poor. And we're asking for 3 biennium of data points so we can chart or at least trend what the FCI is over time and from previous bienniums. Now I got to caution you, there are factors that influence an FCI that are may arise from one biennium to the next. You have a huge roof project that is coming due in 2027. That's going to spike your FCI need. That's why we look at it from a biennial perspective and from a 10-year perspective or long-range perspective to look at the trend and of what is due for renewal or replacement. And what we ask for is we ask for the current FCI, their 10-year FCI, if they receive no funding, what's going to happen in their portfolio? Well, their FCI is a balloon up, and then their as planned FCI, which is if we implement the projects and that are in their plan, what is the resulting FCI for that'll become the new current FCI in the next biennium? So that's kind of how we do stewardship. It's using metric. Does the plan identify or mitigate risk to the agency's facilities? For them too. So what are the risks agencies should plan for? So some of this I think makes sense, and some of it's a little I think amorphous a bit, but there are issues that come up that actually relate to all of these that affect agencies. And one is natural, is a hazard. So that's our seismic, our tsunami, our flooding. That's a logical lens that we look through. Energy reliability. So Bill, you know all about that. Sort of the social aspect of things is, are you managing, potential threats from, there's political unrest, there's all different kinds of things. State police have buildings that need to be reinforced in a certain way for safety reasons. Are we considering the potential of protests, like we've had things happen on Capitol or whatnot? So those are all things that need to be factored into sort of the planning of facilities. Of course, the economic side, funding and affordability. Affordability is sort of a relative thing, but we'll deal with that later in the conversation. And then health and safety. I mean, obviously, this is sort of born out of pandemic times where that was very timely, but it does play into our risk mitigation sort of strategy about, have you considered things like pandemic, supply chain, access, all those kind of things. So that's the risk side of things. Next one is does the plan incorporate climate change adaptation strategies where applicable? So this is something we did that it's one thing to talk about energy or carbon or whatever, but ultimately we're trying to deal with risks to buildings that are related to climate change. So is it an efficient location or supports telecommuting? Is it an adaptive reuse? Sustainability aspect, which is greenhouse gas emissions and energy efficient design, disaster preparedness, migration planning. So is Oregon going to be a refugee state of climate refugees in the future because which could spike our population? There's a lot of modeling about that. So that's why that's in here is just consider the potential for population change. And then resource reductions, water, energy, human resources. We've had issues with like the state hospital that actually lost its water source a few years ago. And that was a big deal. And they've since mitigated that risk, which was a CPAB thing that they presented, which
There's a question from Director Ryan. Do you want to take that?
I didn't want to interrupt. I don't want to mess up your mojo, Daniel. So if you want to just keep on going and we'll circle back to the question, that's cool. Or if you want to do it now, that's good too.
Yeah, I'll just circle back to it, but I think
Sounds good.
all these comments will be good to kind of refine this.
Yep, thank you.
So when you have this sort of evaluation criteria for a plan, what are you deciding? I think this gets to the crux of what your job is you accept the agency facility plan. They completed their work. It's found that there's no issues. We accept this plan. Vote on that. It gets accepted. A plan acceptance letter is given to the agency, and they move forward. Then you can't accept an agency plan with comments. So this plan is great, but we wish you'd look at this alternative a little bit harder and see if it pencils out better. We do that often. And the next step below that is we provisionally accept an agency facility plan pending further information. So they presented something to us, but it wasn't clear, and they said they need to get back to us to make that clear. We'll have them come back, or if they provide that information. Rarely do we do a provisionally accepted facility plan, but the times that we've done it has been beneficial. So, and then there's the not accepted agency facility plan. So if an agency facility plan is incomplete, or there's no compliance, obviously we're not going to accept that. Yeah, go ahead.
I just have a question back on the criteria, so you keep going.
Okay.
I don't ever recall us not accepting. I think most agencies have always, like, to the extent we want more information, they go and, address it. But if we went through that process, so we didn't accept it, what's the outcome of that?
Well, we've never not accepted a plan.
Yeah. So my hypothetical still is.
So it's, I think that, you know, it would move up to, it's kind of what we're getting into later in this meeting is talking about how do we sort of summarize the process and report this to the DAS director. And clearly, if something says the plan wasn't accepted, that's something for management to deal with.
Okay.
So we're just
Yeah, I think historically what we've done is, we look at this like, hey, it's missing some things. We point that out, we're advisory, right? We point that out and then the agency addresses it.
Yeah.
That's
usually the most.
99%.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
Is what happens.
Yeah.
Do they get a chance to represent?
Well, they do. However, we're in a really compressed timeline this year because of the governor's office. So
They could submit an answer to the question, right?
they could submit a memo, but we would have to pick it up in the September meeting.
Yeah.
And we're to have, which the budgets will already be submitted by then, but in terms of our output summary to the DAS director, will be reflected in there. And so I think as the situations emerge, we kind of pivot to one way of dealing with it. And so this particular situation, we only have 3 months to get the presentations done. So hopefully we won't have that issue, but generally it is pertained to the next part I'll talk about, which is the capital project review, where they didn't provide sufficient information for an evaluation to be made, like just too vague or something like that. And we've asked agencies to come back at our August meeting and do a subsequent presentation that would answer or address those questions, and then you get full agency acceptance, agency plan acceptance. So that's the agency plan part of it.
Can I ask my question?
Yeah.
So the guidelines, and I realize this might be a late question. When I think about regulatory frameworks, mostly for facilities, those come up in things when you execute a project, code, et cetera. But now I realize there's the seismic rule and then the energy rule. Is that something that the agencies are speaking to of whether or not their plan comports with impending rules that are coming down from my standpoint?
The agency facility presentations require to report if they have, in particular about the building performance standards, Department of Energy, report which buildings are considered covered buildings, which they're subject to building performance standards by the criteria, and it's usually very large buildings right now, and not a lot of buildings in the state are tier 1, but they will report their EUI to the extent feasible, because we're still booting up this building performance standards program, and so I've asked for it. To the extent that agencies can actually respond to it, we'll have to see how that goes. Same goes for seismic. Seismic may be a little bit tricky for this go round, simply because the whole point of the template was to gather information so that we can decide how many buildings we have that meet life safety standard, how many are essential facilities, how many are operational facilities, how many have first responders support, that kind of thing. We need to know that. And then also know which buildings would be prioritized from the agency side to undergo mitigation to at least achieve life safety. And remember, according to the executive order, they have until 2060. So we're going to see these trickle in as by biennium or more. But again, this is still something we're implementing now, so we're having to feel it out a little bit. And part of that is this data collection exercise that we need to do, and whether or not that, for, again, the smaller agencies can probably accomplish that in a few hours maybe, but for a larger agency like ODOT or corrections or whatnot, that's, they probably have to apply a little bit of staff time to do, and we'll help them to the extent reasonable. I'm always open for helping them, but there's information there we're asking that is only they know, we don't know. So
Sorry, two more questions related to that. The planning horizon for these plans, is it just 2 years? Is it,
yes, it's for the next biennium.
and is there any longer range outlook that they're asked to provide a narrative or sort of
Yes.
years of multi-year forecast?
We do a 10-year FCI, which is basically the outlook for the stewardship part of it. But in terms of whether or not what's being planned in the current biennium matches up with some long-range goal or strategy, that's what that first part that I was talking about, where the mission, the strategy, framework, all that kind of stuff, that all plays into that, where they need to articulate how the future implications of this facility in relationship to what they have planned long range. That kind of gets at that.
Is there any value in asking some qualitative questions about, please explain in 300 words or less how you're imagining you will go about implementing compliance requirements with energy and seismic goals, and express any challenges you may have in that space, like either organizationally, like I don't have the staff to do that, or do you see something coming? I'm just asking from either just so we know, or from even a signaling standpoint, like this is coming. How are you thinking about getting ready for that? Is there any benefit to doing that, or it will just happen the next time when there's more information? And
I think that's something that needs to mature a little bit for us
Okay.
so on some level, we're trying to see, we're sort of test running a lot of this stuff this time. And a lot of this is new. We have a new database system, we have new people on the board, we have these new kind of regulatory things, as you mentioned, these executive orders and rules. So the agencies need time to respond to that in a way that's constructive, like we've given them clear expectations about what
that makes total
things.
sense. Yep.
And at this point, the issue is we're kind of at 0 hour with this. So we're kind of locked in for now. But we want to figure out in the next few meetings, what can we think about in the future, and then sort of work that into our manual and whatnot. So the next CPAB agencies know this in advance, they can plan for it and respond meaningfully. I think if we're super rigorous about things that require data or whatnot, that's maybe challenging. So I guess that's my thing is we are kind of locked in to what our expectations are now, but we want to be mindful of things, always room for improvement and ways to enhance the process. So your questions are not only valid, I think they're very valuable in terms of having kind of objective kind of review of this. And again, these were developed several years ago, so we can repurpose them for this time, but I think we might want to transition to something that's a little more.
I think they're great. Yeah.
So if we're ready to move on, I'll move on to the project review. So again, you're providing constructive feedback to the agency to make sure it's a successful project. Our goal here. Our guidelines is the project supported by the agency's strategic facility and master plan. That gets to a little bit of what you were stating a little bit. Does the project adequately address the stated purpose or need? Has the agency evaluated other alternatives? And is the agency's preferred alternative reasonable? I think reasonable is one of those squishy words where I think it's sort of the collective thing of the group, you know, and that's why we debate a little bit at the end of the presentation before making the decisions on plan acceptance and project acceptance. What the current phase is. We have there's a range of phases that you can go through in terms of project development. But for just the intent of CPAB, we've condensed it down to just, is it in a planning phase or is it in a construction phase? The planning phase is important because some agencies don't have access to funds necessarily to do the planning work ahead of time. So they come to us with conceptual proposals and then seeking funds to develop the proposal and then go to construction. It's not our preference that way, but it's sort of the kind of the way things have worked out. If it's in a construction phase, that's like, is it shovel ready? Is it, you know, if you give funding, you have all your permits in order, you're ready to break ground. There could be shades of in between there, but that's how we kind of phased it to say, if there was to be some sort of priority of one project over another, is a shovel-ready project have higher priority over a project that's still in a planning phase? That's for you guys to decide, but that's why that's there. Has the agency identified or secured an appropriate project site? And it's fair to dig into that. Is the site new site or is it on state-owned land? Is it located in a place that's logical for the purpose? You know, you can dig into that if you want, but there are times when agencies request funds for projects that they don't even have a site yet because they're going to use some of the funds to buy the site. It's happened. So there's a spectrum here, and so that's why some of this is a little squishy language, because we're trying to deal with things that may be on somewhere on that spectrum of. And is the estimated total project cost reasonable? Now, reasonable, that word, squishy again. This is where you need to use your professional judgment. We don't have a table of project costs available for us to compare. Does this seem high, medium, low? Where does it fit within that? We have some guidelines, but the problem is that agencies have different costs. There's no uniform cost because it can be regionalized. It could be that certain expertise is needed, or in the case of like the Department of Corrections, their projects are always much more expensive because they have security to deal with. So having kind of a rubric to evaluate cost is something that we need to put a pin in right now, but it's worthy for us to kind of, for the future, to consider. Then, does the project mitigate a risk to the agency's facilities? And does the project implement climate change adaptation strategies? And does the agency have sufficient capacity to execute the project? And by capacity does the agency have like project management staff? Do they have that can manage the project? Different agencies have different level of skill with that. You know, DAS has project managers, so we're very skilled in that. So that it's worth asking is, can the agency actually execute the project? And so
Our owner's rep an appropriate substitute. So we don't have the staff, but we have the ability to hire.
yeah. So there's internal staff, project managers, whatever, and there's external sources, owner's rep, GC, whoever. So the board decisions that you make regarding a project is you recommend the project. You recommend the project with comments. So we like this, but you didn't really answer this and we're concerned about it. Can you come back to us with some more information? And in this circumstances of our schedule, we can determine whether or not that happens through a memo or if that happens through a presentation. I'll take your thoughts on that when we get to that point. And then there's not recommend the project with comments, why we're not recommending the project. I think only one project has ever been not recommended since I've worked here. So again, you know, it's rare. I mean, agencies do really good work. But you never know. There's a project that just doesn't make sense, maybe a head scratcher that I'll recommend. And I put this note down below. A CPAB recommended project does not guarantee its inclusion in the governor's budget or approval by the legislature. Nor does it prevent non-CPAB recommended projects from being authorized. There's things that have been authorized in the past at the legislature that you guys weren't big on. So I don't know how to summarize that other than that this is a structural framework for us to approach the task, but within that there's still a lot of squishiness and latitude for how we sort of evaluate things. So that's what I have for sort of presenting you as board members, getting you up to speed on what your task will be for the meeting. So for the new members, the agency shows up, they make a presentation, you ask questions, and then after they're done presenting, you discuss the plan, project, whatever, and then make your recommendation at the end, and then we formalize it as a vote. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Is there any questions about what you're being asked to do coming in June?
David has a question, and then what if we roll through Director Ryan's?
Oh yeah, you got a lot
Yeah.
of questions. Okay, let's go.
That was,
Now's the time.
that was my question. The three things that Shannon's spoken of. Would, I think you're asking possibly to include them in the capital review project guidelines, Shannon? It seems like 3409 should be considered because of the strength of it and all about, embodied carbon and all the project we're doing. And
Yeah, I am not wanting to upset the apple cart here because I know we all know we're in a year of transition, as Daniel mentioned, and we build, bigger and more robust guidance and whatnot, both for ourselves and for agencies and for you, the board, going forward. That said, I'm wondering, just because, so we'll start with 3409. 3409 is a really huge piece of legislation for those of you who are not familiar with it, and it imposes timelines on agencies and repercussions if we don't meet certain EUI targets and whatnot. So that work has not started yet, but I'm wondering if we could, and maybe it's part of the narrative or maybe the conversation rather during agency presentation, and maybe something for agencies to be thinking about before they go into the presentation, just to be prepared for a conversation about, and I don't know what the correct section would be. Maybe it's in the climate adaptation. I'm just tossing it out there that at this point, sans formal guidance from, we have, DAS has some work to do. DAS is doing the work now, but agencies are not going to have that in a month or two as they're trying to build their budget. So I'm just wondering if it could be a conversation piece. I don't know, maybe hearing from other agencies. What are your thoughts on that? And again, not looking to make this a more complicated process than it needs to be. It's just, I think about 3409, I think daily, so.
I'll just add, so in our presentations, we're asking them for their EUI target and the buildings that are covered buildings, and then I'd have to look at it again. We are asking about 3409. And
Okay.
the seismic. It's just whether or not they're further enough along. Oh, and do they have any energy management plans?
Okay.
So the theme, what you're saying, Daniel, is the theme is embedded in the review guideline. It may not be teased out like Director Ryan is suggesting, but having that as part of the criteria or presentation, at least the discussion, would be very helpful to us as board members.
Well, I think adding it to these review guidelines is a simple fix. And we just need to like figure out the language, you know, do they comply? Do they comply with 3409 or
Well, I think the question is, what is their plan two, right? Because it's early,
yeah.
right? So I think it'd be informational.
Have you
Right.
considered
Mhm.
Informational.
the executive order on seismic also? Have you considered what circumstance your buildings lie in? Whatever you're proposing, is it
On your radar.
answering that?
Yeah.
So did you ask like what is their strategy for complying with?
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Simple sentence, but
Yeah.
Maybe,
it expands one of the, it adds to this list.
That is an easy, that get kind of what.
yeah, that's what I was trying to ask. I mean, and maybe it's what is your strategy? And then it's, if you haven't had time to consider this, what are the, you know, what are the barriers? I mean, because there are different barriers that organizations have, and then just to help elucidate, you know, are they just not interested, or do they don't have a project manager or whatever it might be?
And then the third thing that Shannon mentioned is a priority ranking of their project list. If they have more than one thing, is that set up that they priority?
We
rank?
don't have it set up where we have an agency priority. Well, I don't know.
Oh, but we have a priority list ranking.
Yeah, we're not, that's what we're talking about next is how do we get there? Because we don't have anything established. So,
Yeah, and I realize we're not there yet, so I'm wondering if it would be instructive to hear from the agencies, like, these are the most important things for us, and we can like at least make a note of it, right? Because sometimes we get all these projects get to the CFO and, you know, they're building agency budgets, and I am speaking from my own experience, DAS's own experience with this, that sometimes they're like, okay, we'll just do this one and this one. You know, the analysts will just grab a couple projects that fit into whatever. And I know we've had to claw some of that back before, like, okay, if we're in a restrictive financial environment, come back to us and we'll tell you what to swap out because we know what's most important to us. So I was just taking that my own emotional scar there and wondering if there was a way to just have agencies proactively say, you know, if we're in a restrictive environment, these are the most important things to us, or this is how this shakes out. And it doesn't necessarily need to, like, you need to weigh on it. I think it's more informational to the end of the line, right? The end of the process where this all lands in CFO. It's just my 2 cents.
okay.
And maybe from a very, very future state standpoint, it's a little bit concerning to me to hear that we've only ever not recommended one project, and maybe that's just because they really know what they need, but it would be great if we provided guidance on how they would prioritize things, or they would assess the value of something to make that common, just so that when that information comes forward, maybe there's an ability at some point way in the future for the board to have its own sort of risk register of projects or value register that it can kind of see apples to apples if it wants to get more stringent about what it says yes to or not. And that's a very future state thought, but just providing like very common frameworks for how to assess risk or value might be nice at some very future date.
Okay. Point taken. Sounds good. Anything else on that front? Still a lot of words on there. I can't really see them though.
I had, I'll go to my first comment, back in the guidelines section at the top. Should one of the questions, or one of the conversation points be, around community engagement or collaboration, or whatever that looks like for like a new build or a renovation?
Yeah, so there's a, let's see. We have this thing called a capital project intake form, which goes through this sort of guided process of coming up with a lot of this information that would go in here. And part of that is what effort they're making for doing outreach and community engagement.
Oh, okay.
And
Great.
submit a summary of what they've done. And that would be uploaded into the intake form. That part is sort of agency facing.
Yeah.
And I can show you that, Shan, by the way.
Yeah, okay. No, I believe you. As long as it's captured, somewhere, or, it's been part of the process. And then one more, and then I'll be quiet. With respect to, again, don't want to put the cart in front of the horse and make this any more complicated for this go round. But I'm wondering if there could be a question about the methodology used to get to the estimates for the projects. Just how'd you figure this out? And importantly, does this include escalators? The CPI adjustment for construction inflation for a couple of years, because I will tell you from this point where we're at right now with agency request budget, by the time it goes through the legislative process and we get our budgets and then they get baked in and then we have to do procurement and then we have to do all the things, it can easily be 2 years from like right now before we ever pick up a hammer or a shovel. And so just want to make sure that that's accounted for in estimates.
That's particularly true with someone coming forward with an ask for design. They
Right.
get some money for design and then they got to go through another 2-year process to get money for construction. That's
Right.
like a 4-year escalator right there if they approach it that way.
Yep.
The other thing, Shannon, we talked about this last time, I think it was, but I think your methodology for estimates is a good one because it helps us compare the various requests. If they're diverse in the way they've estimated them, we need it. It would be really good if we had a common way, which we talked about, Tri-Riga using means, and everybody's on the same basis.
Okay.
So I think it's an issue.
Yeah, I think we'll get there. I think we'll get there, but maybe for this go round, it might be instructive just to understand, hey, how'd you get to this number? Because I think it was mentioned earlier, it does vary wildly with what is it, where is it, what are the geo conditions, so on and so forth. So I just think it would be a good footnote for now.
I think we can work it into the guidance here, and maybe it's a sub bullet under the cost bullet, and we say, how do you derive at your cost?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah,
And what
perfect.
escalation factors are you considering for the project timeframe? That's easy. I think that's a great suggestion.
Okay.
So
All
I
right,
can
that's it. I'm
add
gonna be quiet now.
come back to our next meeting with sort of a revised version of this that incorporates this stuff. And I think,
Valuable to the Jeffs.
is it valuable to you, Jeff?
Yes,
All right.
He's been
it's all
taking,
stuff I think about anyway. I've been
I know.
working into our plan. It's just not part of necessarily put into the EFP that is presented.
Okay, so as far as this, is there any other questions? Because I'm sort of through with my spiel here. Anything else? Can't see the chat. Okay,
There's nothing else, Daniel.
all right.
It's just me.
So that's all I have, Bruce. If you want to transition to what you were
All right, well,
100%.
I'd be happy to kind of build on the work that you've already done. Great job on laying out kind of the framework that we already have that shows us a couple of salient features, whether it's the total cost or whether it's the risks or the FCI, all that information is so valuable for us as we do our work to look at the projects. And I want to acknowledge having CFO, Capital, and LFO representatives in the room. Feel free to pipe in as we go. I'd like to take a few minutes just to show you a couple of the things or a couple of the approaches we take over at higher ed. And I'm going to ask Amy to pull up some PowerPoint if you have them, the PowerPoint slide, and put it on the share screen.
If I can find.
And Bruce, I don't know if you want me to share the guidance that just went out to agencies about budget requests or
Yeah,
not.
please do.
Okay.
Let's hear from Ms. Brickman. Go ahead.
Just a quick, we just sent out guidance for agencies building their budgets for 27, 29, and have basically said that no policy option packages that are requiring new resources are going to be allowed. So they're not going to be allowed to submit unless they have to follow a procedure, a process and procedure that's separate from the CFO process. And so if you have projects that need to go in front of the Capital Projects Advisory Board, they can submit those as potential options for their agency request budget. But in general, we're in a deficit for the next biennium. And so if agencies are wanting to do new things and new programs in general, I'm not talking capital related, they have to self-fund it, meaning they're going to have to figure out where they're not going to do something within their budget that they're doing now and pay for it within their existing budget, which is the first time since I've been with this office, and I've been with this office for a little over 18 years, that we've basically said no policy option packages. And so this process might be a little bit strange because I think that while we're allowing agencies to submit capital projects that would require bonding or significant capital investments, it's so that we can get the CPAB's weigh in and guidance to give to the governor in moving forward. Especially, I don't know what the bond capacity is going to be for the next biennium yet, but so just agencies are operating under a very limited ability to ask for anything in their agency request budget.
Short leash.
Yeah, very. Yeah. So I just wanted to let you know that that's kind of where we are at this point in time. But we did say that an exception process for capital related projects that go through the CPAB project would be, yeah. Yep. So
Thank you very
Yeah.
much. I wanted to take a follow on to kind of the segue of how could we look to the future? And one of the things we're doing is we're looking at other best practices from the state. And we're standing on Daniel's shoulders because he was in Oregon University system before it became the higher education system. And we talked a little bit about some of the great work that they had done to help kind of mitigate deferred maintenance and backlogs in university buildings and colleges. So next slide, please. So on the more recent university slide here, you can see that in 2023, we measured this, and there was a reduction in the deferred maintenance, which means the facility condition index was improved. And so we want that facility condition index to keep going down. And so we measured it by the deferred maintenance backlog divided by the current replacement value. And as you can see, in about 2002, it was almost 20%. And so this is a big improvement over the last 20 years because of state investment. Next slide, please. And there's 4 capital principles. One is that we have plenty of space on the university side. We just need to bring it up to code. Second is we're all about making it energy efficient. So HB 3049 is really where the universities are going now. And then collaborations, PSU, U of O, OSU have a good history of like coordinating with others, like the education tower at PSU was a collaborative of OHSU, PCC, the city. The Vanport building wouldn't be there today without those collaborations. And then on the university side, there's always a goal to be contributing, have the institution contribute, the state contribute, any partners contribute. Next slide. And then a few years back, we had independent architect Smith Group come in and do a strategic, a 10-year strategic capital development plan. And one thing they said is, you've got to be thinking further out. You got to look at beyond just the age of the building, look at the condition and look at what you're going to do with it. What are you going to teach? What classrooms do you need? How have you linked with industry? What jobs do you need? So it has been really introspective and helpful to step back and say, oh, we need more semiconductor, or like the Jen Soon Huang building at Oregon State is has a $50 million supercomputer contributed by industry, and then it's going to have, you know, the best research in the whole area. So we're excited about these kind of ongoing investments. All right, there are a few differences on the college side. Their aggregate was 8 million, now they're up to 12, but they can only have one active project going. And of course, for all this, remember the state method for bonds is you get it at the tail end of your bond money for 27, 29, you'll get it in 29. All right, next slide. In our last go around, we had several projects that had both a demo and a new construction. Southern Oregon University just completed a demo of the old Cascades Hall. They saved about $15 million of deferred maintenance, and then they saved between 15 and 20% of utility consumption in the entire campus, just for take the 3.5 million of the ARPA dollars that came through, had a substantial improvement on energy for their campus. So we're thrilled when we see these kind of proposals. Next slide, please.
And when you measure energy, you're measuring the total energy spend, right? Not just electric. You're looking at natural gas.
That's total energy.
Total energy spend, yeah.
Yeah. All right, the last go around, the top 4 projects made it all the way through. Made it through the agency, made it through governor, made it through the legislature. You'll note the top priority for all the institutions on the university side is our revolving fund, the capital improvement renewal. And the legislature has steadily increased this fund, and it's based on a allocation formula. We do a survey every year of all the buildings, 830 buildings. Everything's E and G. Everything has to have a purpose. And so 120 million is going to come in, and our team is reviewing the allocations for it'll be December when DAS says, okay, get ready, give us your allocation final. That's one thing we'll do. U of O has a child behavioral program up in Portland, part of the whole new renovation of the former Concordia campus. Southern has creative industries and student success. And WU is moving, Western is getting a data center. It's kind of a great story. They're going to build a new space. They demoed several old buildings. All right, so next slide. So a group of projects didn't make the first round. I fully expect to see this same list, like 7 through 11. I'll probably see those in my inbox in April, because by April 6th, the institutions will provide their new request. Okay, next slide. There are some projects that are going to be funded by the institution based on the revenue. So for example, PSU's got a new housing project and they're going to tear down a couple of old IDM buildings and housing, but they're from the revenues that they generate from students, future students living in these buildings, they'll pay for it. And so we do a revenue sufficiency to test a pro forma to say, okay, let's look at all the revenue expenditures. And then, you know, what's your bottom line? Can you pay for your debt service? All right, questions so far? All right, next slide, please. So here's what's in the current university rubric, and it really has kind of these. We have the strategic section, the savings section, sustainability, life safety, institutional priority, and this one thing that Shannon was suggesting is, wouldn't that be helpful if we had the institution priority? So that's required on the university side. If there's going to be a couple of projects, we got to know number one. And then we reserve a section for how we are improving on serving those underserved students, rural, military, those kind of categories. And then every time the institution does a match or contributes to the project, they get higher points. All right, questions so far? And some of, like Daniel does the intake for all state agencies. I do the intake with my partner Terry. We do the intake from the universities and the colleges. And so we help build a part of the rubric response that shows, well, how'd you score? How much deferred maintenance did you actually do? And we take, for the deferred maintenance, we actually look at how much they're going to pull off of their deferred maintenance log. And we compare that to the total project cost. And we get a ratio. And then we use that, the higher, you know, the more deferred maintenance that's washed out, cleaned off, more points they're going to get. So that's kind of that's our model. And then I don't know if we'll have time to go through. The board members might have received a couple of glances. Jeremy asked us to start looking at, well, what could we, you know, if we could measure things, what would we do? And could you do I think I have a Word document. Could you pull that up, Amy?
Bruce, I have a question. Who assigns the points, you and your team, on these for projects when they you have points for each of these? Who does the point assignment?
It's an evaluation team. We have about 10 people from HEC.
It's not the people necessarily submitting the request. It's
the submitter doesn't create. The submitter doesn't create
any kind of point value.
The point value.
It's
It's independent, just like CPAB. It's HEC staff, or on the college side, we have a group of volunteer presidents that don't have a project in the mix. So they come in, and so everybody's a volunteer, just like everybody's a volunteer here. So we're looking for the talent and strength and knowledge that they bring.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I interrupted, but that's interesting.
So as we think about the future and what we've learned from our experience at the HEC is that we've had a team of about 10 people, and we too have some quantitative things. We have a few qualitative, and we don't try to limit ourselves to just what we see in the proposal. You know, if we have more in-depth knowledge of a campus to help our professional judgment, we use that as well. And then some of the measures are attainable and some are stretch goals. We've only seen a couple of pretty close to perfect score. Nobody's ever got a perfect score on the HEC side. It's almost impossible. But it is a high score is attainable. And then here's what we could do if we're thinking of like, not 27 to 29, but 29 to 31. We could do a beta test of pretty much what Daniel already laid out, but put it kind of in a little quantitative kind of a workbook to say, okay, here's how we could measure it. And here's what we'd measure. I think there's a lot of agreement, like on the risks, on the seismic, on the climate. There's a lot of solid information we already have. So hats off to Daniel and all the crew, Amy, everyone who's worked to get us this far. We think that we could move to another quantification as a beta test. Kind of the segue that you were talking about, man. All right, questions so far? All right, well, that's kind of where I'd stop. And now ask questions for, I want to see if there's any Dash Capital. I think Chris Curtis is on the line. Let's see if Chris Curtis has anything for us today from Dash Capital.
Nothing from me, Bruce. Thanks for letting me listen in.
All right, and do we have any LFO staff joining us today? Okay, if not, we've anything else you wanted to? So we've heard from, let's give the agency reps that are in the teams a chance to ask questions that they may not have already asked. So let's take a few minutes to hear any questions. If you're an agency member and want some clarification on where the CPAB is going, now's your time to speak up. Anything, Jeff?
I think my supervisor's online.
Okay. Or you can put it in the chat.
Shy group, or very thorough.
Well, I'll just mention that Jeff McGowan with Oregon Department of Forestry, that looking forward to get the final version. So as we go through this next cycle of the facilities, of the statewide facilities planning process manual. And it would be helpful to get the additional guidelines that DES is working on for seismic, because we did generate just a rough order of magnitude of estimate of seismic retrofit type projects, but then it would be good to figure out what to weed out and what to keep in or prioritize, so that we could submit a reasonable amount of estimate for each biennium to get to 2060.
It's coming soon. I just have to prepare a cover memo. So I'll explain how to do it. So let's do it last. I think if I were to summarize, what we're trying to do is we're trying to take sort of a summary of the process in a way that applies some sort of scoring methodology to rank projects in a way that more meaningful projects, or projects that sort of meet most of the criteria that we've outlined, can score and be higher. Instead of just being recommended, it's like we recommend this most and this by the least. Our tasks between now and whenever, it's really, we have some working meetings here we can do between now and June to kind of flesh that out and maybe do a soft launch of some summary component at the end of CPAB, but more formalize it afterwards. Because we want to have the agencies to know what the goalposts are before they're doing their plans. So if that's suitable for people, I think that we can spend the next few meetings kind of hashing out what these sort of elements. I mean, the thing, HEC, I like HEC because they have this sort of formalized process, and you know, it is familiar to me because I used to work there, but The difference is not everything translates, and we have to figure out what are the components that make sense for state agencies and for our process that we can achieve that way. So that's the next task. And I think, doing it collaboratively, I think, and even with some agency folks, if they're interested, to kind of figure out what is the most meaningful metrics for this rubric. Do you get points just for doing what is expected of you, or do you get points for doing more than what's expected of you? There's all these kind of questions, and that's kind of where I'm at. Is I just want to take kind of a collaborative, fresh approach to it, and especially when Jeremy's here, that he has some clear vision about what he's sort of thinking of, and so I think we can get somewhere by the end of the CPAB season. Something like that. Anything else?
All right, let's see if we addressed Troy's
I
question.
just said thank you.
Yeah, okay, good. And for the board members, anything else you want to add for today? Early meeting done early is a good thing. So with that, thank you all for your wonderful work and time and investment in improving the process. And especially we thank the board members who are volunteering their time. They're doing this either on the weekend or in night hours, because we know all of you have full-time jobs already. So hats off to you for coming up here, advising the state. We do appreciate your contribution, so thank you very much. Bill, anything else today?
Quick word, adjourned.
All right, meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Shannon.